Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of May and the new moon that we have in Gemini on the 27th. But we have a lot happening. Round about the 12th of May, in fact, exactly on the 12th of May, when we had the full supermoon, the full moon in Scorpio, and it was indeed a supermoon as well, we had a massive power outage in London, which knocked out the tube, the metro system, and a lot of the train lines as well, the on-ground train lines. And because those trains, whether underground or on ground, carry millions of people a day, it was absolute chaos. And remember that the sun was conjunct Uranus, the moon was opposing Uranus that day. Uranus is to do with earthquakes, volcanoes, eruptions. It's the planet of electricity. It's the planet of discontinuous energy. It's never smooth or linear. It comes in bursts, and that's how you can have cyber attacks, power outages, which is what happened in London that day. And also on the 11th and 12th, 12th was the day of the full moon in Scorpio, a lot of volcanic activity across the world that was heightened. If we look to the volcano in Hawaii, that became incredibly active, and it's being reported that it had very unusual activity that had not been seen for 40 years. So certainly something is going on, and potentially for the rest of this year we are getting into bigger earth changes and greater seismic activity. So it was right on my ascendant, that full moon, and was an immensely powerful day for me, it's fair to say. Anyway, onwards. We have Ceres, which is coming together, which is linked to harvests and grains, coming together with Saturn in the middle of May. And that hasn't happened since January 2020. Ceres was very much involved with that very big conjunction of Saturn, Pluto on the 12th of January. Ceres was right in the thick of it. Mercury was involved as well. And we know that that was the beginning of the pandemic. And Ceres is very connected to, as I say, to harvests and grains. Remember, in the myth, her daughter Persephone was kidnapped and taken down to Hades. And Ceres, in order to negotiate getting her daughter back, brought on winter. It's said that she was the cause, that whole myth was the cause of the initiation of the seasons. So winter, spring, summer, and she only allowed spring to come back after her negotiation with Jupiter allowed her daughter Persephone to come back to Earth from the underworld. So she is very linked to the underworld. She's also very linked, I think, to self-care. And self-care is going to become a much bigger issue in June when Jupiter goes into Cancer on the 9th, but we'll talk about that in the next update. So it's interesting that in January 2020, Ceres was conjunct Saturn then, and that was about how we related self-care to what was coming down from authority, because that was also in Capricorn, remember, the sign that Saturn ruled. So it was a combination of, how are we linking and combining our need for self-care together with the demands of authority? And that was really, really clear. Now, as they are starting to move into Aries in the second part of May, it's much more about sovereignty, because Aries is one of the principal signs, along with Leo, of sovereignty. So it's a very different expression. How are we going to combine self-care and sovereignty and link that with the rules and regulations or governments or authority, etc.? So it's got a very different expression, and that fits in with a lot of the context of the astrology that I've been talking about. Very powerful days on the 17th and 18th. We have what is called the Uranus cazimi, and what that means is the sun becomes exactly conjunct to Uranus. And this is the last time this will happen in Taurus, because Uranus is about to move, or begin to move, out of Taurus into Gemini on the 7th of July. So this is the last time in Taurus. So Taurus is about fixed earth. It's about our, about Gaia. It's about our physical bodies. It's about the financial system. So the 17th and 18th are potentially very peak days for Uranian expression. So remember all the things I always talk about with Uranus: seismic activity, volcanoes, earthquakes, aviation disruptions. I understand there are quite a few airline staff strikes across Europe at this time, across various airlines. Uranus is to do with strikes. Uranus is to do with aviation as well. So that could be one manifestation around the 17th, 18th. It can be, again, cyber attacks, power outages, as we've spoken. It can be disruptions. It can be disruptions in the financial system, sudden radical changes. It can be digital currencies suddenly coming into the news in a bigger way. It can be any or all of those. I never know the actual events. But whatever is going to happen on the 18th, we certainly have a very intense day, because the moon is also conjunct Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. The moon, as we know, is related to the people, and whenever you get hard aspects between the moon and Pluto, it's intense feelings on the part of the people. So that could be around issues of freedom, humanitarianism, egalitarianism. Do the people have a loud enough and a clear enough voice in what's going on? So the same day, the 18th, Mercury is square to Mars at 14 of Taurus Leo. So that can be very fiery and too quick to speak. Too quick, Mars, speak. Mercury can be angry words. So again, take a breath. If you get riled or you feel anger coming towards you, take a breath. Be mindful before you speak, before you react, because you might be very grateful that you did. Just take those few moments. Also on the 18th, and I'll talk more about this later, we have Jupiter exactly squaring the nodal axis. So whenever we have any planet squaring the nodal axis, it can be quite a crossroads, and that is individually and collectively. And so this is really digging deeper into our belief systems, Jupiter, where we want to go in the future. Do we have to abandon our belief systems from the past, or many of them? It's questioning our belief systems in order to move forwards into our future that we desire. And I'm gonna come back to that a little bit later, because it's also connected, that nodal axis, to letting go any victimization or self-criticism, the Virgo end, to step more fully into our power, which links with all the Aries energy too. Through a lot of the second half of May, in fact, really from the 13th to the 24th, we have Saturn on the very last degree of Pisces, the anaretic degree. And so the anaretic degree tends to be a bit of an extreme or crisis expression of the sign of Pisces. So this could be around issues with the seas, the oceans, water in general, toxicity, pollution, that kind of thing. It can be about shipping, blockages, or issues around fishing. It can be limited water, in sort of rationed water in some parts of the world, those kinds of things. But that's quite important as well. We have so much going on this month. So on the 25th of the month, Saturn enters Aries for the first time in this cycle. And it will stay in Aries until the 1st of September. Then it retrogrades back into Pisces until the early months of next year. And I had an insight actually about positively how Saturn is working for us in this evolution. How really positively Saturn is working for us. So I'll put the link for that video below. I called it Saturn in Aries Imaginal Cells, and it really seems to have helped people. So rather than repeat everything I said there, please go and look at that video. So it's very interesting that the Sun is actually exalted in Aries And although the sun isn't in Aries at the moment, it is exalted in Aries. Saturn moves into Aries on the 25th of May, and that's round about the time that the UK government have announced a sun dimming programme. And Saturn, of course, is about limitation or blockage, dimming of the sun, because the sun would be exalted in Aries. So, it's another very clear expression of that. And I think we're going to have a lot of, although the debate hasn't happened in Parliament at all, I think the people are going to have a lot of debate about that. But this is nevertheless a whole new episode with much clearer boundaries for us individually. This is to do with stepping into our courage, our wisdom. Saturn is about our maturity, being the elder, not being an impetuous youth, but having the wisdom of maturity and age. So it's like the wise elder being born at this episode as well, being a pioneer in something. It will very much be a whole new beginning for humanity, but also for you individually. So again, as I've mentioned, I've already filmed a Saturn and Neptune in Aries video. I'll put the link for that below. And I talked about that in detail, but see where these very early degrees, the creator degree, the very first degree of the zodiac falls in your chart, which house area. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website, go to the link below, you can get a 2-part video series that you can watch to infinity that will explain to you how to find these points in your chart. It's not birth chart analysis. These are teaching videos of how to find these points in your chart that I cover in these updates and what each of these updates therefore means for you. But it's a biggie. This is one of the biggest transits, Saturn, Neptune conjunct at 0 of Aries, that you will have in your lifetime. It's really that big. So also the day that Saturn moves into Aries, we have Mercury conjunct Uranus. So we could see, and this is again right at the end of Taurus. I forgot to say on the 17th, 18th, when the Sun comes to conjunct Uranus exactly, that will be at 27 degrees of Taurus. And that is also really exactly conjunct to Algol, the fixed star that is about losing your head. So again, we could see people going kind of crazy, or people leaders being knocked from power. It could be that kind of thing. It doesn't literally have to be people being decapitated, although that's what is part of the myth. So 25th, we could see Mercury conjunct Uranus, some surprising or shocking news coming out at that time as well. So even before we get to the new moon in Gemini, we have a lot of astrology happening. So let us now look at the new moon in Gemini. And this is happening on the 27th. Okay, so as always, when we have a new moon, we have the sun and the moon together. This is at 6:04 of Gemini. So see where 6:04 falls in your chart, and don't forget to set a new intention for what you would like to create in your life. So very important. Now, on the one hand, this can be a relief after all the Scorpio energy, the intensity and the emotion, because Gemini is known to be certainly very social, quite light, quite playful, loves to get out and meet people. It's very curious, very good with new ideas, particularly writing. Starting a new creative project which is linked to writing is really an excellent way to go. It's this new moon is very empowered because it's trine to Pluto in Aquarius. They are both connected to the mind. Aquarius is linked to higher mind. Gemini is linked to more day-to-day mind. Friends, neighbors, connections locally, coming and going, that kind of thing. But certainly this new moon will activate what I've repeatedly called the wonky triangle of Sedna, Haumea, and Pluto. And I've talked about that at length in the Metamorphosis for Humanity video in particular. I'll put the link for that below. I've also referred to it in the Big Picture 2025 to 2027 video. Put the link for that below. But the ruler of Gemini is Mercury. And Mercury here is conjunct Sedna. And Sedna is really, you know, the myth that she's the Arctic sea goddess. She rules the deep seas in that area. And when her father chopped her fingers off and, you know, allowed her to drown or transmute into a sea goddess, her fingers became these beautiful new sea creatures of dolphins and whales, etc. And those sea creatures are said to be very high vibrational. Dolphins and whales are said to be 15th dimensional. If you watch a stunningly beautiful film, the Joan Ocean film, Joan Ocean is now, I believe, in her 80s. She spent many, many years swimming with the whales and the dolphins, and she feels that they are 15th dimensional. I'll try and find the film link because it costs $11. It lasts for 2 hours, is exquisite filming and worth every single penny. Highly recommend that. I've talked about this in the past. But isn't it interesting that I was just referring to these very deep sea creatures, which oddly are starting to appear on the surface or closer to the surface of the sea? I think we are going to, and I've mentioned this several times before, we are going to discover so much, not only about our cosmos and further out in space, but deep seas, inner Earth, deep, deep seas, the sea creatures, the fact that they are also advanced intelligence, they are helping us in our evolution. I think we're going to discover all kinds of new natural medicines from the seas. You know, the solutions and the discoveries are going to be enormous, I think, going forwards. Absolutely enormous. And the ruler of this new moon, Gemini, is conjunct Sedna. Uranus is also going to, it's already technically conjunct Sedna. It's going to move into Gemini on the 7th of July, but I will talk about that in a later video because it will really ignite Sedna's myth. Now, just looking at this chart, see how many planets we have in Aries and how many we have in Gemini. So look in your own birth chart, see where Aries as a sign falls, see where Gemini as a sign falls, because those two houses for you are going to be very activated at this new moon. And, you know, these are both very initiatory because, I mean, Aries par excellence is the sign to do with new beginnings, initiating, etc. But Gemini wants new things. Gemini wants variety. Aries is linked to sovereignty. Gemini is the nonconformist, doesn't want to fit in particularly with other people, wants to socialize, but wants to define self as being different from the others as well. It's quite nonconformist. Not many people realize that about Gemini. But therefore, we have harmonious sextiles between here Saturn, Neptune, Ceres, and Sedna, and Mercury. And I would even stretch that actually to the sun and moon. So sextiles bring opportunities. So again, look in your own chart, which two houses are being linked by these sextiles? You know, is it something, I don't know, in your 7th house, in your 9th house, for instance, these two signs, there will be 2 signs apart, obviously. And is it something in your marriage, your long-term romantic partnership that is stimulating you to start to study metaphysics, 9th house, or take a formal professional course of some kind, or go on a big trip, big holiday, big travel somewhere, 9th house? Do you see what I mean? These opportunities, these 2 houses that will be 2 houses apart from each other, see where they're falling in your chart. They will very likely bring up opportunities. Hope I'm being clear here because I'm covering a lot quickly. So we are likely to see at this Gemini new moon a lot of new information. Don't forget to set the new intention for what you want to manifest. Innovations with transport, with aviation, with perhaps another step forward in self-driving cars, electric Aquarius, trine here to the new moon. We are going to see a lot of development in many kinds of transport, local drone activity, certainly flying cars, as I say, will. And I'm not saying whether this is good or bad or right or wrong. I'm just anticipating how the astrology will start to manifest. Big time aviation in terms of faster and more distant space exploration. As we, not just at this Gemini new moon, but as we move forwards in the months to come and years to come. So I think also, and I've mentioned this again, but it's very clear at this new moon, because these are both to do with the mind, higher mind, lower mind. I think we are going to start to see all kinds of discoveries and understandings in our neural network and our consciousness, and the link. Explaining consciousness with science is going to become a much bigger thing, a much bigger deal. This has already begun with Saturn moving through Pisces, linking science and spirituality. It's going to become a much, much bigger thing, linking science and spirituality, a much, much bigger thing going forwards. Scientific proof of consciousness, how our neural networks work, all kinds of devices to help us with this, and up to you to choose whether you use those helpful devices or you would consider them not helpful and want to be purely natural and organic in your way forwards. Gemini is big time the sign of choice. And I really want to emphasize this in a way, because we're making choices in a kind of jumbly, rumbly thing all through our day, aren't we? Shall I have a cup of tea? Shall I have a cup of coffee? Shall I get up now, or shall I spend that extra 10 minutes in bed? Shall I walk the dog now, or shall I do it later? Shall I contact my very good friend, or shall I do that to all of these little mini choices that you go through in your day in a fairly unconscious way, really. One of the big themes of 2025 is becoming much, much, much more conscious of our choices, so that we are aware of every choice coming with intention, because we are aware of the power of our thinking, Gemini, and our choices as we move through our days. Much more aware of how that's affecting our timelines that we're moving on to, and also our state of being. I can't emphasize this enough. Being aware of what we have largely been unaware of from this point on. I've mentioned often in the past with Gemini energy, I cannot recommend the book enough by Edith Eger called The Choice. Incredibly profoundly moving book. I sobbed through so much of it. It's her true story of how she survived the Holocaust in a concentration camp, what happened to her, what happened to her sister, and how she, gosh, I'm going so goosebumpy now, how she realized very, very early on when she was captured and taken to the first concentration camp that her attitude, her choices of her thoughts, and her frequency were everything in terms of whether she survived or not. I won't say any more than that, but I cannot recommend that book enough. I think you cannot be untouched by that book. There are no laughs in it, but you cannot be untouched by that book. And it will help us understand the importance of our choices. Because going back to what I was saying earlier, Jupiter, through a lot, it's exact on the 18th, but through a lot of this month, is square to the nodal axis. And Here is Jupiter here at 26 of Gemini, again linked to thought, thinking and choices, etc. But it's also still at this point square to the nodal axis. Remember, the south node is not normally shown in a chart, but it's always exactly opposite the north node. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this is raising issues around your belief systems. Are they still appropriate for your future, for where you want to go? Do you have to shed your belief systems? Are they outdated? Are you being shocked out of them at the moment? And the blend between your belief systems and your choices defines your kind of lens on how you perceive your day-to-day life. That combination of the choices you're making, being very aware of them, and your belief system forms the lens, forms your expectation as you move forwards through your day. How are you actually navigating your day in terms of your frequency, your state of being? You know, for instance, let's take an example of you're pregnant. Are you so filled with joy that you are counting the moments until that new baby arrives? You are just blissed out. You're planning his, her bedroom and the color scheme and the toys, and you are just beyond excited at the arrival of and that's kind of dominating your days with pure joy, pure love. Or if you're pregnant, or you actually say you're a single mother and you're very stressed financially and you don't know how you're going to cope, and it's causing you sleepless nights. So you have the same situation of the pregnancy, but your lens on how you've made your choices up to now and your expectations of your life day to day moving forwards are extremely different. So I'm just giving that as an example because I think we've got to become more aware of how our choices and our belief system create our frequency and our state of being, from which everything cascades in our life. The universe is just a mirror of reflecting back your frequency to you. You know, we get more of what we think about all day long. What you focus on expands. So all of that area that I endlessly bang on about is a big part of this new moon, I think. The other thing we have ongoing, and it's exact at this new moon, and I talked about this a lot in the last update, is this conjunction between Chiron and Eris that we are still feeling to some extent, or some of us are, some injustice, some vulnerability, and we need to heal that. Or our protests, remember, feisty street fighter, our protests are galvanized by that sense of wounding and vulnerability. And actually what we ultimately need to do is to move forwards in love and compassion, because Venus is part of that conjunction too. Now we have a very important yod here. Now a yod is a finger of fate or a finger of God, which is like a skinny triangle. So Homer is at the point of this triangle, and a yod, finger of fate, finger of God, is composed of two 150-degree angles. They're inconjuncts, or they're called quincunxes, and there's a sextile at the base. And Homer is the highlighted at the top of the skinny triangle. And so, as I've talked about in previous videos, this 150-degree aspect between Homer and Sedna is going to last really for the next 3 years, because Homer has an almost 300-year orbit, Sedna has an 11,400-year orbit, and that's going to be very long running. However, what is being picked up here as the other point in the yod is Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune just coming into Aries with this whole new beginning for you and the whole new beginning for humanity at the creator degree of 0 of Aries. And so that is forming a sense of destiny. And yes, it's linked to all of the biological change for humanity I've talked about, the metamorphosis, but there's this terrific sense of regeneration. And that regeneration comes from the Sedna myth, but it's very much part of the Haumea myth. Again, I've talked about this a lot. Haumea is the link to the Hawaiian goddess of fertility. In her fire goddess aspect, she's said to birth the 8 islands of Hawaii. Isn't it interesting that the volcano in Hawaii is extremely active right now? Haumea also was able to birth babies from all over her body, reverse her age, regenerate herself, etc. So there's this terrific sense of regeneration, perhaps for us as humanity, which I do believe as well. But also, and yes, I think there are going to be technologies and supplements by which we can reverse our age. And that isn't to do with vanity, although, it's jolly nice, isn't it, if it happens. But it's actually to do with a deep sense of well-being and shedding disease, shedding the ailment, shedding the degeneration. But also this is about the regeneration of the earth. And I absolutely know that the earth herself is going through some major timeline jumps with us hanging on to the earth because we live on her and experiencing those timeline jumps too, to take us to a very, very different future timeline for the earth. We've broken out of the tram tracks. It's no longer same old, same old. So I have great hope as we look at this yod, this finger of fate, the finger of destiny here, that regeneration is a very big part of this new moon. That's going to become much stronger as we move through the months, particularly I think July onwards is going to be, well, actually June is very strong because we have Jupiter moving into Cancer and forming a square to Saturn and Neptune, and they're all on the world axis. Then Gemini, 7th of July, Uranus, 7th of July, moves into Gemini and conjunct Sedna. But much more of those in future updates. But I think all of this picture is going to help us to reconnect to, as Haumea does, she has this deep ancient connection to the earth, and she has a very strong shamanic side, that we are going to remember the ancient wisdom of the earth, the practices of restoring health to the earth, to nature, and to ourselves. It is an evolution jump forwards. It's an involution in terms of a remembrance back to ancient times when we actually had a much higher level of intelligence and frequency. And the animals have kept that to a much larger degree than we have. But we're starting to turn that around now. So there's a sense of interconnectedness with all that is, a much greater tuning into nature and the earth, and loving nature and the earth in a way that we have absolutely not done in this lifetime. So I think what appeared to be a very kind of light and social and fun new moon in Gemini has an incredible amount of depth and wisdom and promise for where we are headed. So I'm going to stop sharing now. So I hope that's been helpful for you. There's so much in there. And I actually feel incredibly excited because I think we have an immense amount to look forward to in terms of loving the earth back to health, loving ourselves back to health, innovations, solutions, understanding the true nature of energy and frequency in terms of what that means for ourselves, and curing all kinds of diseases. So I think we are on a very, very fast ride, and please try and keep that state of excitement rather than fear and anxiety. because if you're on the frequency of excitement, that is going to take you to a very different future timeline than the one around fear and anxiety. Hope that's helped you. Back very soon, no doubt, with more variety of videos. God bless. Thank you for listening and being with me today. God bless. Bye for now.